right, so you know how we all have conversations every day?
Uh-huh.
Well, we're doing a deep dive on a podcast episode all about how to make them better,
Okay.
especially for people who don't speak English as a first language.
Yeah.
But honestly, these tips are great for anyone.
Cool.
One thing that really surprised me was how important it is to mirror the other person's energy.
Really?
Like if you want to connect with someone naturally,
Mm-hmm.
you got to match their vibe.
That's interesting because it sounds kind of like you're copying them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, how do you do that without being creepy?
Right. So it's not about being a copycat. It's more about responding in a way that shows you're on the same wavelength.
So how we respond to what someone says matters just as much as what we actually say.
Exactly.
Like, I always thought it was polite to keep my answers short,
Mm-hmm.
but this episode is saying that those one-word answers are like conversation killers.
Like you just hit a brick wall.
Totally. Imagine someone asks you, how was your weekend? And you just say, fine.
Oof. Yeah, that's a dead end.
It's like you're shutting down the conversation before it even has a chance to get going.
Right. Instead of giving a one-word answer, think about offering a conversational hook.
Okay, I like that, conversational hooks. So what does that look like in real life?
Well, let's say someone asks you about your weekend. Instead of just saying fine, you could say something like, my weekend was great. I tried this amazing new ramen place downtown.
Oh, so you're giving them something to latch onto?
Exactly. Now they can ask you about the ramen place or what kind you got, or if you'd recommend it, and suddenly the conversation has legs.
I see. So it's not just about being polite. It's about showing the other person that you're actually interested in talking to them.
Right, you're giving them something to work with, like you're throwing out a line and inviting them to reel you in.
I get it. So ditch the one-word answers and give them a hook. But what about asking questions? The source had some really interesting thoughts on that too.
Oh, absolutely. They talked a lot about the power of asking open-ended questions.
And what makes a question open-ended?
So these are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. They force the other person to think a bit more and share something about themselves.
Oh, so instead of asking, do you like to travel?
I might ask.
What's the most interesting place you've ever traveled to?
Yeah, that opens up a whole world of possibilities. It's way more interesting than just getting a yes or no back. Okay, so open-ended questions are key. But there was this other tip that really threw me for a loop. Mirroring energy. Help me out here.
Oh, yeah. That one can be tricky.
Because I don't want to come off as some creepy mime, like just copying everything they do.
I hear you. It's definitely not about mimicking their every move. It's more about making subtle adjustments to create rapport.
So what does that look like in practice?
It's like tuning into their frequency.
Yeah.
If they're super excited about something, you want your tone and body language to reflect that enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're more reserved, you'd want to adopt a calmer, more respectful approach.
So how do I know which approach to use?
You got to read the room, pay attention to their cues. Okay, so give me an example. Let's say someone's telling me about this amazing concert they went to.
Okay, so they're probably pretty hyped up about it. You might lean forward a little, nod along, and match their energy with your voice. Like maybe even say something like, wow, that sounds incredible.
So I'm showing them that I'm right there with them experiencing the story.
Exactly. But what if they're talking about something more serious or somber?
Like, what if they're telling me about something that's really upsetting them?
Then you'd want to dial it back a bit. Maintain a relaxed posture, lower your voice slightly, and use phrases like, that must have been tough, to show empathy and understanding.
Got it. So it's all about reading the situation and adjusting accordingly.
Exactly. You want to find that sweet spot where you're engaged but not overwhelming.
So it's like finding that perfect balance.
Right. And the source actually gave a great example of this in action. It was a role play where a simple question about a coffee mug led to this whole conversation about travel and food.
Oh, yeah. That was fascinating. It showed how even the smallest details can spark these amazing connections.
Right. It's all about asking and sharing. You ask a genuine question, they share a part of themselves, and then you find a way to connect it back to your own experiences.
And it's not about trying to dominate the conversation or impress them with your own stories.
It's about building a bridge of shared interests.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just about what you say, but how you say it and how you respond to the other person.
And that's where things get really interesting. We've laid the groundwork, but there's still so much more to explore. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into finding common ground and keeping those conversations flowing naturally.
Can't wait. You know, it's funny. I never really thought about conversation as a skill you could learn.
Yeah.
But this deep dive is making me realize there's a real art to it.
I know, right?
It's like we're all playing this game, but most of us don't even know the rules.
And this source is giving us the playbook
Right.
with all the strategies we need to level up our conversation game.
It's not about trying to manipulate people or anything.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding how people interact.
And using that knowledge to connect with them on a deeper level.
Exactly.
That role play with the coffee mug,
Mm-hmm.
it just blew my mind how a simple observation
Yeah.
could spark this whole conversation about travel and food.
It was a great example.
But you know what really resonated with me? Was the emphasis on being genuinely curious.
Ah, yeah. That's so important.
It's not about performing or trying to impress the other person.
Right.
It's about truly wanting to learn about them.
And when you're genuinely interested, it really shines through.
People can tell when you're faking it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's when the conversation starts to feel forced and awkward.
But when you approach it with a genuine desire to connect, it becomes this joyful exchange of ideas and experiences.
It's like you're saying, hey, I see you. I'm interested in what you have to say.
Exactly.
And that creates a safe space for real connection to happen.
And that's where all those techniques we talked about come in.
Right, like ditching the one-word answers,
Asking open-ended questions.
mirroring their energy.
Exactly. They're not just tricks.
They're tools to help us build those connections.
Right.
So we've talked about being a good listener, asking engaging questions and matching energy. But what else can we do to keep those conversations flowing? Like, what happens when you hit that inevitable lull?
Well, the source actually addresses this directly. They
Yeah.
talk about the importance of finding common ground.
Common ground.
Yeah, it's about looking for those shared interests or experiences.
That create a sense of, we're in this together.
Exactly.
So even if you're talking to someone who's really different from you,
Uh-huh.
there's always some common ground to be found if you look for it.
Absolutely.
Like, what kind of common ground are we talking about?
It could be anything, really. A love of music,
Oh,
a shared hobby, or even just a similar sense of humor.
so it's about being observant and picking up on those cues.
Exactly.
Like if someone mentions a book they're reading
Uh-huh.
or a band they saw
Yeah,
recently,
that's your invitation to dive deeper.
like if someone mentions they love to cook,
Hmm.
I could ask them about their signature dish.
Yeah.
Or share a story about my own culinary misadventures.
Exactly. And suddenly you're not just strangers anymore.
We're two people who share a passion for food.
Right. You've created that point of connection.
A shared experience that allows the conversation to flow more naturally.
It's like finding a hidden path in a forest.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes these conversational tips so powerful.
Yeah.
They're not about turning us into smooth-talking robots.
No.
They're about giving us the tools to connect with others on a deeper, more meaningful level.
It's like learning a new language.
Oh, yeah?
At first, it might feel awkward or challenging, but with practice, it becomes second nature. And before you know it, you're having amazing conversations without even thinking about it.
That's where the real magic happens.
Right?
When you're so present and engaged that you lose track of time and just enjoy the flow.
Exactly. And the source touches on something really important here. It's not about being a perfect conversationalist.
There's no script to follow.
Right. There's no set of rules to memorize.
It's about being authentic.
Being present and allowing the conversation to unfold naturally.
So even if we stumble or say the wrong thing, it's okay.
Yeah, as long as we're coming from a place of genuine interest and respect.
The connection will still be there.
Absolutely. It's about letting go of the pressure to perform.
And allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to be real.
That's what people truly connect with.
Okay, so we've talked about being authentic, listening actively, and finding common ground. But is there anything else we can do to make our conversations truly unforgettable?
Unforgettable.
Like, how do we leave a lasting impression?
Well, the source gives us one more gem here. The power of storytelling.
Ooh, I love a good story.
Everyone has a story to tell.
That's true.
And sharing those stories can create a deep and lasting connection.
But sometimes I get nervous about sharing too much
Yeah.
or boring people with my tales.
I get it.
How do I know which stories to tell and when?
The key is to find stories that are relevant to the conversation and tell them in a way that's engaging and entertaining.
But how do I do that?
Don't be afraid to use humor, emotion, and vivid details to bring your stories to life.
Like, paint a picture with your words.
Exactly. Think about the stories you tell your friends.
The ones that make them laugh or gasp or say, no way.
Yeah, those are the stories that people connect with.
And it's not just about sharing our own stories, right?
No, it's also about encouraging the other person to share theirs.
How do we do that?
Ask questions like, what was that like? Or Tell me more about that.
Oh, I see.
It shows you're truly interested and creates a space for them to open up.
So it's a two-way street.
Right.
Sharing our stories, listening to their stories,
Mm.
and weaving together this tapestry of shared experiences.
And as you listen to each other's stories, you might be surprised at the connections and insights that emerge.
It's like you're piecing together a puzzle. And each story is a piece that helps you see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Wow. This is making me see conversation in a whole new light. It's not just about filling the silence. It's
Right.
about creating something meaningful, something that connects us to others and enriches our lives.
Beautifully said. And that's really the heart of what this source is trying to teach us.
Yeah.
Conversation is a powerful tool for connection, understanding, and growth.
It's a gift we give each other.
And the more we practice these techniques, the more we can unlock its full potential.
Wow, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
I know.
Like, I feel like I've been given this secret decoder ring for conversations.
Uh-huh.
Who knew there was so much to learn?
It's amazing how much we take conversation for granted,
I know, we do it every day.
but we rarely stop to think about how it actually works.
And the crazy thing is, these techniques aren't just for, like, social butterflies.
Oh, no, not at all.
You can use them in any situation.
Right, like networking events,
First dates,
even just chatting with your neighbor.
it's all about connecting with people.
Exactly. The principles are universal.
It all comes back to being present
Engaged.
and genuinely interested in the other person.
Right.
One thing that really stood out to me was that there's no such thing as a perfect conversationalist.
You don't have to memorize a script or anything.
Exactly. There's no magic formula.
It's about letting go of that pressure to perform.
And just being yourself,
Exactly. Embrace those quirks.
your unique perspective.
Don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable.
You know, I think that's where a lot of us trip up.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in trying to say the right thing.
We end up sounding like robots.
Totally.
Yeah.
And people can spot a fake a mile away.
Authenticity is magnetic.
You know when you're genuine.
People are drawn to you.
They feel like they can relax and be themselves around you.
Right. And that's where the real magic happens.
That's when you create those genuine connections.
Speaking of authenticity, the source had some great advice about showing genuine interest.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
It's not just about asking questions. It's about really listening to the answers.
And responding in a way that shows you care.
Exactly. Active listening is key.
What does that look like?
It's not just about hearing the words someone is saying.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language.
Their facial expressions.
Exactly. You're tuning into their whole being.
Not just their words.
Right. And that makes them feel heard and understood.
Which is so important for building trust and rapport.
And when you show that level of interest,
Uh-huh.
it naturally leads to more engaging and meaningful conversations.
So it's like this positive feedback loop.
Exactly. The more you listen,
The more you learn.
the more you have to talk about.
Wow, this has been an incredible conversation.
I agree.
We've covered so much ground today.
We talked about being authentic,
Listening actively,
finding common ground.
sharing stories.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a little challenge.
A challenge.
Think about a recent conversation that felt a bit flat or uninspiring.
Okay.
How could you have used these techniques to make it more engaging?
What open-ended questions could you have asked?
What stories could you have shared?
We encourage you to put these tips into practice.
See what happened.
You might be surprised at how much more you enjoy your conversations.
And hey, if you have any aha moments or conversation triumphs,
We'd love to hear about them.
thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of conversation.
Until next time.
Happy conversing.